So you know those AI summaries that you see at the top of your email client? Journals see those too. And they may be misconstruing some of the information that you are putting in your email body. Apple Mail, Gmail, and Microsoft all have AI technology that's summarizing the emails. We partnered with Era to figure out how exactly AI is coming up with these summaries and what types of information they're pulling from the email body. So let's get into it. Overall, Microsoft has the longest word count of each of the platforms that we looked at, with about 156 words on average. The average number of words does vary a lot with Microsoft in terms of length as well. You can see here about 77.5% average variance from one summary to another. So this next one's a big one, and this has to do with whether or not AI is pulling information from the beginning, middle, or end of your emails to put in the summary. You can see Google and Apple really pull from the beginnings of the emails. We broke it down into a different section too, beginning, middle, and end. You can see Google and Apple again on top here. Microsoft is a little more spread out, but remember, Microsoft's are a lot longer, so they have a lot more to work with. So my first takeaway, I think, from this study is try to front load the most important information, which shouldn't come to us as a surprise to anybody. Now, we actually also looked at subject lines, which I thought was very interesting. And we compared certain keywords that appear in subject lines to tell if they're actually showing up in the AI summaries. And we saw that Microsoft seemed to do this more frequently than others. And we looked at the threshold here of like 4 to 5 words that matched. Obviously, going up to 10 words, there's not a lot of matches, but 4 to 5, 6 to 7, 8 to 9, we thought made the most sense when we're comparing subject line inclusion into the AI summary. So Microsoft, a little bit more influenced by subject lines. And when we're talking about the actual keywords, we can see things like new, data, expert quote, or the position of the expert. Those all came through with Microsoft a lot more than Apple and Google. Now, the tailored intro, this is an interesting one. Personalization, I know, is a hot topic, but Microsoft seems to include a lot more of these tailored intros. When we're talking about tailored intros, let me just give you an example here. I read your previous article on the new rules for landlords, blah, blah, blah. So referencing something older and existing, that's the kind of stuff that these Microsoft specifically seems to be pulling into the summaries. All right, what about something like bold text? If you bold some of the text in the body, is it more likely to show up in the summaries? I'd say it's not really, to say partially. Google seems to have included it the most. And remember, those are the shortest, so there might be something to that. We also looked at bolded text. You can see here Microsoft, Apple, and Google all are including it more than 50% of the time, with Microsoft obviously the most, again, because probably Microsoft is the longer. But remember, bolded text tends to show up in an email at the beginning section, and we saw earlier that beginnings of emails, that information is more likely to be pulled in. So that might be what's causing this, but still, I think bolded text is always a best practice. All right, what about table information? I'd say they do reference them fairly often. Again, this might be due to the fact that tables show up a little higher in an email, potentially. But I would say if you have table information, definitely show it, because it does seem to be showing up. Google pulling, again, Google is a small one, so they are pulling some key information there. Attachments, graphics, pretty much none at all with Google and Apple. With Microsoft, we see 90%, but really all they were doing was just saying there is an attachment. They weren't actually reading the attachments. They weren't looking at what's on the email attachment, on the image, to be able to say what it is. I think it's this case now where the AI that they're using just isn't powerful enough to do something like that. Not to say that it's never going to get there, but right now doesn't seem to be able to look at images at all. Links, this is an interesting one. Microsoft seemed to be the only one that was going to links, and sometimes they'll at least mention the link, but sometimes they were actually appeared to be pulling a very small amount, pulling some of the information from the link that was not actually even in the email body, which I thought was interesting. So maybe Microsoft works a little differently than Apple and Google, and that they're able to go onto the link itself. Regardless, I think it's important to always include a link, a target for the user or the journalist to view if you have something for them to view. Okay, and last one is probably the most important, and this idea of misrepresenting data. This does happen in about 1 out of every 3 summaries, more so in Apple and Microsoft, and less so with Google, but it is happening. So the recap for me here is, if the journalist is just relying on the summary, you might get burned a bit, but you're always going to want to double check how a journalist is writing about your content. Again, this is a best practice in general, because you don't want them misrepresenting something that you said or misrepresenting something that a client or expert said. So best practice in general. So definitely check out this full study. It's on our website. I also want to call out Chloe Osunsami, Alex Fisk, and Laura Brothers, all from ERA, who did a fantastic job collecting and running a lot of this data for me and helping me compile it and write this study. So check it out. Let me know if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Thanks.